This is not a 50-50 choice. The modelling that Alan will speak to in a moment indicates that if we open up too fast, then we have a very high likelihood that we're not really opening up at all. We're just beginning a third wave.
If there's any benefit to be had from the coronavirus lockdowns, it's gotta be the total unveiling of the authoritarian left and the broader misplacement of executive powers over the economy and our lives. When you factor for the real-world lethality of the virus, not projections or models, but actual likelihood of contracting and dying from COVID-19, compare that to the absolute madness of Australia's Dan Andrews, Premier for the state of Victoria and arguably one of the most concerning cases of economic manipulation and illiberal restrictions on society in 2020. When compared to countries that have had very high success in public health management without indefinite, heavy-handed quarantine enforcement, like Sweden, the lockdown policies of the Victorian government are nearly 103% stricter, according to the COVID-19 Response Stringency Index from Oxford. As you would expect, this has levied huge economic turmoil on residents of the state and has really lowered the quality of life there. The situation in Australia, now dubbed the Melbourne Syndrome, is so impossibly justifiable. It's lunacy, a totally unnecessary stagnation of life for 6.6 million people. But that's all right, so long as the computer modeling says so.
I'm going to ask Alan to speak to one of the most comprehensive modelling exercises that we have ever seen in our state, arguably nationally, and a piece of work that has international significance as well. More than 1,000 different scenarios have been put into this supercomputer. We're very grateful for the assistance of the University of Melbourne and the University of New England. You can't argue with this sort of data. You can't argue with science. You can't do anything but follow the best health advice.
Call me a crazy American, but tyranny shouldn't suddenly become okay because of a software algorithm. Haven't we seen this movie before?
Sergeant, get him on the line!
Okay, maybe not that extreme, but this siege on liberty and the societal conformity fueling it shouldn't be trivialized. Former chief economist for the Australian Chamber of Commerce, Steve Cates, served 24 years in the duty of providing sound economic strategy for the prosperity and security of regular Australian people. He gave a comment, an inside look into the Melbourne Syndrome, saying, quote, "The COVID-19 pandemic has brought on our modern version of the Stockholm Syndrome, which is defined as feelings of trust or affection felt in many cases of kidnappings or hostage-taking by a victim towards a captor. We now have the Melbourne Syndrome, which I come across versions of every day. Feelings of trust or affection felt during a lockdown by its victims towards their most authoritarian political leaders," end quote. To understand how bad the situation in Melbourne is, take a look at some of the footage of Australian police brutalizing people for not wearing masks.
Get off of me! Get off!
Let go of his vest. Let go of his
He's fucking choking me! He's choking me! What the hell?
For what? For a mask? For not having a mask? Look how pathetic you are. She doesn't have a mask. Are you serious?
It doesn't challenge me either. It's against the law to challenge me.
I'm not going to argue anymore.
Yeah, it's against the law to challenge me as well.
I'm not getting off. Come on, Devin.
Go! Who the fuck's
Medical conditions. I need to speak to you. I've asked you. I'll speak. Get up. Medical conditions. Let go of me.
What are you in it for?
Victorian police have even argued the need for officers to break windows of vehicles in order to enforce social distancing and contact tracing.
In the last week, we've seen a trend, an emergence, if you like, of groups of people, small groups, but nonetheless concerning groups who classify themselves as sovereign citizens, whatever that might mean. We've seen them at checkpoints, baiting police, not providing their name and address. On at least 3 or 4 occasions in the past week, we've had to smash the windows of people in cars and pull them out of there so they could provide their details because they weren't telling us where they were going. They weren't adhering to the Chief Health Officer guidelines. They weren't providing their name and their address. The message is clear from me, and it's simple. We want you to stay at home. That's what the Chief Health Officer wants you to do. We expect you to adhere to the Chief Health Officer guidelines. If you don't, we will be enforcing those. We will issue infringements. We will arrest you. We will detain you where we have to. We now have significant new, if you like, infringement, not powers, but in penalties in the infringements. And for those who are not at home when they should be self-isolating, when they should be quarantining, and we conduct those checks, we'll issue those infringements. And on that second occasion, you may well get a $5,000 infringement. The consequences are there for you, and you must adhere.
Even while idling in what should be classified as your private property, your car, the government still feels it necessary to control your behavior and movement. That's pretty wild. Let me run through just a few of the rules associated with the extension of stage 4 lockdowns in Victoria. The declared state of emergency in Victoria has been upgraded to a state of disaster, meaning police can now enter your home and carry out spot checks even if you don't give them permission, and they don't have to have a warrant. Between the hours of 8 p.m. and 5 a.m., you're not allowed to leave your house unless pre-approved for work, medical care, or caregiving. Outside the hours of 8 p.m. to 5 a.m., you can only leave your house for 4 reasons: shopping for food and essential items, care and caregiving, daily exercise, and work. We can no longer have people simply out and about for no good reason whatsoever, said Andrews. If you do decide to get some daily exercise in, it can only take place within a 5-kilometer radius of your home and can't last longer than an hour. You can't exercise in groups of more than 2, even with members of your household. Apart from daily exercise, you're only allowed to leave your house once a day for essential supplies and food. God forbid you have the munchies one night and want to do something crazy like getting a Big Mac at 1 a.m. Continuing on, in the whole of the state of Victoria, you cannot buy more than 2 of certain essential items, including dairy, meat, vegetables, fish, and toilet paper. Actually, on second thought, with a rule like that, probably best to avoid McDonald's for a while. And Indian food. Schools, of course, have to be closed again, because think of the children. Golf and tennis venues, which were open, now have to be closed again. I mean, what sport has more social distancing than golf? Weddings are no longer a thing, and funerals are limited to 10 people. Face masks are now mandated anywhere outside of your home for the entire state. You can't have friends over or go to another person's house unless it's for the purpose of giving or receiving care. However, you can leave your house to visit a person if you are in an intimate personal relationship with them, which is pretty weird if you just want to see your grandma. If you had another home or planning a vacation outside of Melbourne, too bad, can't do it for the next 6 weeks. And finally, the maximum fine for breaching any of these listed health orders currently stands at $1,652. The list goes on, of course, but you get the idea. This level of response to prevent against a 0.002% chance of fatal transmission is inappropriate. But perhaps even more dire than Aussie cops feeling justified pepper spraying and curb stomping anti-maskers is the defense Dan Andrews gives for continuing this terrorism.
For instance, if I can just speak to pubs, cafes, restaurants, bars, there's no point having those venues open if we can't allow customers to move freely and go to those venues. And we simply can't safely have hundreds of thousands, indeed millions of Victorians in metropolitan Melbourne moving around freely, going to have dinner at a restaurant or going to a pub. If we do that, we won't do it for long. We will not do it for long.
It's pretty chilling to imagine that a public servant would declare this level of anti-freedom regulation. It's even more chilling to know that it may not even be Andrews himself deciding the fate of Victorians, but some vague closet algorithm consuming data in a lab somewhere and spitting out rules completely void of human compassion or intuition. This is not normal. It's dangerous and threatens to erode the free market principles that pave the way for Western and global prosperity. It's about time we take a long, heavy introspection into the power that we give these politicians and the abundance of life choices we forfeit as a result. That's my opinion, but yours are what make the video fun, so please comment your thoughts below, leave a like, subscribe, and of course be sure to check out AIER.org for more great content. Have a great day.